All right, welcome to the Fantasy Six Pack Network. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. We're going to be talking some Green Bay Packers football today, seeing if we can find some consistency from this team, starting with Jordan Love and that receiving core. To help us out here, Wendell Ferreira from A to Z Sports. How's it going today, man?
How's it going, Joe? All fine, and it's also always good to talk some fantasy and some Packers. So let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. So just start right off here, man. And Jordan Love started off the season really hot, especially for fantasy. I don't really know what attributed to it, but just sort of fell off a cliff. Like it seemed like right around like week 8, and that just kind of was good but not great. Like I mean, we had like QB2, QB3 finishes a couple of times, and then I don't know if it was like the injury sort of lingering around or whatever, but how is he looked in camp? Are we worried about this thumb injury now that he got not too long ago, and that kind of stuff? So
Yeah, I think there's a perception nationally, especially because Jordan Love kind of regressed or stale last year compared to what he did down the stretch in 2023. But I think that's mostly because of the sequence of injuries he had last year. He had that knee injury in week 1 in Brazil. Then he had a growing injury, and by the end of the season had an elbow injury. So that sequence, he was never fully healthy throughout the entire season, and I think that's why he played for fantasy purposes not so well, because he was limited to run, and the Packers had to rely too much on Josh Jacobs and run schemes to overcome that. And at the same time, for fantasy especially, I think it affected him because it was pretty limited, and I think that put a ceiling on the Packers offense in general. That's why I think if you look at the stretch last season where Jordan Love was the healthiest around week 11 through week 17, he put up absolutely top 10 numbers in terms of
mm-hmm.
real quarterback stats, NFL stats, not necessarily fantasy stats, but NFL stats, efficiency and all that. So I think now fully healthy, and I expect him to be fully healthy going into the season. I think Jordan Love can certainly be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. In fantasy, I think he has a somewhat limited ceiling because he's not exactly a runner, but I do think the Packers expect him to give them a little bit more in that area too, now that he's fully healthy, because he did that to a certain degree 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean he's got it in him where he can go. It feels like he'll have stretches every single year where he's just going to put together really good games. But obviously, it seems like the team likes to run on lean on the run a little bit too, and that's going to take away from his upside there. And so, speaking of the run, Josh Jacobs was absolutely a monster last year. 1,300 total rushing yards, added 342 receiving yards to boot. Big workload for him, though.
Yeah.
Has always had a pretty large workload, so maybe not too concerned about it. But do you expect that same kind of workload this year, or are one of those guys behind him going to start taking away some work from him?
Yeah, that last year was the first time since 2003 that the Packers had a higher run rate than a pass rate in a season. I think that's mostly because Jordan Love got hurt, but the Packers signed Josh Jacobs and decided to release Aaron Jones in large part because they expect Jacobs to have a heavier workload. So I think that's part of the plan, to sign Jacobs instead of Jones, because Jones was always limited. He's not as physically imposing running back as Jacobs is. So I think that was part of the plan. I expect Jacobs to have a big workload this year once again. Probably not as big as it was last year, because that was probably circumstantial. And to some degree, I think the Packers will be concerned to give Jacobs such a high volume, because he's 27, he's starting to get older, and he's under contract through 3 more years. So I think the Packers will be a little bit more careful to protect Jacobs to the future. But at the same time, that's a give and take. I think that he will have a large role, but probably not as big as last year. In regards to who will be behind him, the idea for the Packers would be to have Marshawn Lloyd as running back too. But I think at this point they can trust him because he's always hurt, and he's hurt again now. I think there's a decent chance that he'll start the season on injured reserve with a new hamstring injury.
Mm,
So at this point, I think the Packers will rely on Emmanuel Wilson probably as running back too, because Wilson and Chris Brooks are both good players, but probably won't have the volume to be reliable fantasy players. But for the Packers specifically, they are seen as different runners because Emmanuel Wilson is a better pure runner, and Chris Brooks is more of an all around running back because he can pass protect and he's a good special teamer. So for fantasy purposes, I would say Emmanuel Wilson is certainly the running back two behind Josh Jacobs. And if Josh Jacobs goes down, for example, I would expect Wilson to be the running back one at least when the Packers are more expected to run, and Chris Brooks would be on the field when the Packers are expected to pass because he can protect Jordan Love much better.
okay, yeah, good enough. Jumping over here to the receiving room, who's had the best camp in your opinion? Matthew Golden's kind of getting a lot of hype on Twitter, and I think for good reason, but just kind of want to hear it from your mouth.
Yeah, no, it's special. Matthew Golden is certainly the best receiver for the Packers now. He's been the best in camp. And Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, said that Golden has had at least an explosive play in camp every day. And those kinds of players doing that as rookies tend to be special for the Packers. That's not me saying, that's Gutekunst saying. So you can see why the Packers are going. And they love him. Everything he's done so far has been special. He had a great family night. He had a reliable game against the Colts. I think the Jets 2 weeks ago. He didn't play against the Colts because starters didn't play. So he had a catch against the Jets. He draw a defensive pass interference on Sauce Gardner. So you can see the flashes. He's much more reliable than the other guys because the Packers last year suffered so much with drops. They were last in the league, the worst team in the league in terms of wide receiver mistakes. Jayden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks, all those guys, they have their capabilities, but at the same time, Golden will be much more reliable for the Packers. And I have little doubt that they will soon be the wide receiver one. Outside of him, I would say Romeo Doubs has been the most reliable guy. Jordan Love loves him, and he has a specific role in the offense, that X receiver. He's the only guy actually to do that because the other guys, Golden is more of a Z receiver, and Jayden Reed has a capped ceiling because he's a slot only guy, and the Packers have practiced a lot with 12 personnel. And when the Packers are in 12, Jayden Reed gets off the field because he can't play outside. So in terms of starting lineup, the Packers are aligning with Doubs and Golden. And then when they go to 11 personnel, then Jayden Reed gets onto the field too. So I would say Golden will probably be the number one sooner than later. And then the other guy is Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I've been ranking it so far. Now that Golden's been having a great camp, it sounds like. So spoke about Reed. If you had to pick though between who would have the better season, would it be Jayden Reed or would it be Dontayvion Wicks, who both struggled last year with consistency? And some of Reed's consistency was just like what exactly just you mentioned. The fact that he's not on the field when they run 12. And so everybody, I think that sort of like shocked everybody last year in fantasy. It was like, wait a minute, why isn't Jayden Reed playing as much? And it was like, oh, he's just not on the field during those personnel packages. And so kind of opened everybody's eyes and realized that his value for a couple of seasons came from large amount of touchdowns. And so last year he didn't get those. And so he dropped like a rock. But what's your thoughts about who would have the better bounce back season?
Yeah, I would say it's Jayden Reed because when he's on the field, he's pretty explosive. And especially during the first half of last season, he was amazing in terms of yards per route run and efficiency in general. When he gets the ball, he's always efficient. He had some drops down the stretch, and he handled some injuries. he's not the biggest wide receiver, so the pounding of the season sometimes gets him. So I think that was most related to that. But Reed is an explosive player, and I think that the Packers count on him a lot, because I'm talking here about Reed not being on the field in 12 personnel and 21. But if you look at the numbers, the Packers play in 11 personnel 65-70% of the time. So if Reed can be on the field all the time when the Packers are in 11 personnel, he'll be on the field a lot, and he'll be an efficient running wide receiver for the Packers. So I think Jayden Reed absolutely is the guy that I would put over Wicks, because he's a starter for the Packers. They list him as a starter because that so-called unofficial depth chart, they have the offense in 11 personnel. So Reed is officially a starter. Wicks, I think he's a good separator. He is one of the best separators in football, but he can't catch the football. He drops so much. And even though he had a solid season in that area in 2023, his rookie season, but this is not exactly a new issue for him. He had some drops in college too, so I think that's an area of concern. And he's hurt. He's dealing with a calf injury to start the season. I don't think he'll be on IR, but I think he maybe will have a slow start. And because the Packers have Golden, Reed, Dubs, those guys are all probably ahead of Wicks, and then down the stretch by week 8 or 9, probably Christian Watson will be back too. So I think Wicks won't have as many opportunities to be on the field and to generate volume that we know for fantasy purposes, volume is such an important thing.
Yeah. And so I'm going to throw another one at you. I didn't send this one to you earlier. Bringing Tucker Kraft into all of this, right? You bring in Tucker Kraft, Jayden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks, Matthew Golden, Romeo Dobbs. Like, it's still very crowded, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it feels like to me it limits the ceiling of any one of these guys. Or do you see one of these guys just taking command of the target share from Jordan Love?
No, I don't think that will happen because the Packers don't want to do it. I think if you look at fantasy and the NFL in general, I think the Packers players are better for the NFL in real life than for fantasy, exactly because of that. And if you look at in general those Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offenses, they want to spread the ball around and they don't want to be so centric. If they have a dominating receiver, the Packers were pretty centric with Davante Adams, but now they don't have this player, so I don't think they will force feed someone to say, yeah, we have a wide receiver one. That's not the case, and I don't think the Packers want it to be that way. So I think, yeah, Tucker Kraft is a really good player. He was super efficient last year. He has an impressive ability to generate yards after the catch. He was first among tight ends last year in yards after the catch per reception. So he's super efficient. I would bet on him outside of Josh Jacobs for Packers receivers, for Packers offensive players in general for fantasy purposes. But at the same time, I don't think he'll go nuclear like a George Kittle or something like that, because he is a good player, but the split in targets will be obvious, and I don't think the Packers expect to change that.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. All right, so a question that we ask everybody that comes on here is, who's a player that maybe some of the casuals wouldn't know that is flying under the radar that you've heard about, seen about at camp, that we should keep in our back pocket? You know, click that little watch list button for future.
That's a hard one, and I thought a lot about it because the Packers have so many wide receivers and so many running backs, and they spread the ball around. We kind of are more familiar with everyone because everyone will have some targets. But the one guy I would mention here is Luke Musgrave, the tight end. He was a second round pick in 2023. He's from the same draft class as Tucker Kraft. He was drafted before Tucker Kraft, and he was a starter 2 years ago until he got hurt, and then he missed kind of the second half of that season. Tucker Kraft entered the starting lineup, and took on from there. He has been amazing so far. So I think Tucker Kraft is the starter, but at the same time, Luke Musgrave, the Packers have practiced more with 12 personnel, as I mentioned, and Luke Musgrave has been a starter in that package too. So he's been on the field a lot. and he brings an element to the offense that I think outside of him, Christian Watson is the only other guy that can do that speed down the field, those seam balls. I think he's awesome to do that. Musgrave is a guy that he doesn't have much ability to gain yards after the contact. It's a running joke around Green Bay that he can't keep his balance. But he's a good player. He's a good target down the field, and his combination of size and speed is impressive. So if the pack, it's always hard to say that someone will keep playing 12 personnel 30-40% of the time. But if the Packers do play more 12 personnel, or if maybe Kraft gets hurt, I think Luke Musgrave is a good guy to keep an eye on because he's a super talented receiver. He's not as great of a fit for the Matt LaFleur's offense as Kraft is because he doesn't block as well. But as a pure receiver, and for fantasy purposes, that's what matters. I think Musgrave is a really, really intriguing player.
All right, sounds good. All right, Wendell, thank you for coming on. I hope everybody here that was listening learned a lot. I know I did. Go ahead and before we close out, let everybody know where they can find you and what you've got going on this season.
Yeah, I cover the Packers for AZ Sports. You can find my content all there, and I cover the AFCs too. So if you can follow everything there, it'll be. And my Twitter is there is Wendell FP, and but in general, it's all there at A to Z Sports. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And still hanging around, click that subscribe button, that like button, leave those comments. We'd love to hear from you. And jump over to fantasy6pack.net. Become an all-access member. You get the award-winning rankings, the draft cheat sheet, the player projections during the season, DFS and betting content, and a whole bunch more. Use promo code F6PPods. It's there at the bottom if you're listening or watching. If you're listening, it'll be in the show description. And then click the playlist that's popping up right here about right now to check out the rest of these team training camp videos. See you next time.